Hey folks, just a quick heads up that all episodes of the Film Nuts podcast contain heavy spoilers and some strong language. Nothing too crazy, but make sure there's no one with sensitive ears too close by. And if you like what you hear today, please consider becoming a patron of the show. You can find links to that page in the show notes, or you can visit patreon.com/filmnuts. Okay, anyway, please enjoy the show, and thank you so much for listening.
If we're gonna date, you may have to defeat my 7 evil exes.
You have 7 evil ex-boyfriends?
7 evil exes, yes.
And I have to fight, defeat your 7 evil exes if we're going to continue to date?
Pretty much.
So what you're saying right now is we are dating?
I guess.
I really love this film because it takes issue with when you're in a relationship, you really have to go through and be real with each other, right? You have to go through the baggage. I also love the packaging because I'm a huge Edgar Wright fan. I love how he directs with the edit in mind rather than, getting into the editing suite and saying, okay, what do we do with this footage? Every single shot, it's like he's seen it already.
Hi, I'm Taylor, and welcome back to the Film Nuts podcast, a show about why we love what we watch. When's the last time a movie opened up your world? Not because you actively closed yourself off or anything, but because the movie showed you something you hadn't even thought of before. And the more you watched it, the more you grew to appreciate it, and the more inspired you became.
We are Sex Boom! 1, 2, 3, 4!
Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, directed by Edgar Wright, is a quirky, fast-paced visual kaleidoscope of young adult angst and video game homages that over time drove my guest today into a filmmaking career. Megan Turner is a content creator and entrepreneur who is working with a team to produce the documentary Synced Together, AMVs and Their Editors. And if you're asking what an AMV is, don't worry, we answer that quickly. Megan and I chat about how anime influences Western media, how Scott Pilgrim vs. the World handles complex characters, and who Megan might have become had she not seen this movie. So let's hit start. Here's Megan Turner talking about Scott Pilgrim vs. the World on the Film Nuts podcast.
The big thing I'm working on is a documentary, and it's called Sync Together, AMVs and Their Editors.
Okay.
So, but to explain this, I have to ask you a question first. Do you know what an AMV is?
Anime music video?
Yeah.
Is that what? Okay. All right. Cool.
Good. Did you look that up, or did I tell you that before?
I want to. Oh, now that you talk about it, I think you sent me some stuff a while ago.
Okay.
But in the subject line, it said AMV, and that's the first thing that came to my head because I knew about it beforehand. But I was like, I just thought of it as like a super niche thing that not a lot of people are aware of, and I think that's still true. But
yeah,
now you're working on something about it. Tell me about it.
Yeah. It's actually the very first documentary about AMVs ever. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
It's been 7 years in the making. So it's been a long time. Yeah. And what's been crazy is, so the team that's been making this, right? It's a pretty big team, but the core team started 7 years ago, and every step of the way was the first time for everything. They had never filmed anything before. We never edited a feature-length, documentary before. And so now it's really beautiful to have it out in the world. We're doing community screenings, so at anime conventions,
Awesome.
Which have gotten just incredible reception and feedback from people, and how really special and unique it is. So I'm actually in the documentary, and also I'm on the team behind the scenes. So that's, a really interesting dynamic. And so we're screening it now in conventions, and then we're working on DIY distribution. So that'll be the next step. And that's even more exciting, because then you can share it with people who don't come to conventions and aren't big nerds like us.
Can you, for the audience that isn't aware of AMV, anime music video, can you describe what it actually is?
Sure. So an AMV is essentially, you take an anime that you love and a song that you say, hey, this actually goes with this, and you make a music video with them. So, for example, you can do something where, okay, well, you love Dragon Ball Z, right? This is really common. I also love Linkin Park. right?
Yeah.
This is kind of how it started. And they were like, okay, well, we'll put them together and make something unique, kind of this fresh video version of fan art. But also you can subvert it, right? Which is really fun. And the first AMV actually that was ever made was with an 80s anime called Battleship Yamato, I believe. I really hope I didn't butcher that. And it's this brutal, space war kind of anime. And the guy who edited it, who just passed away last year, he's the first AMV editor, and he paired it with All You Need Is Love.
By the Beatles?
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's this comedy, right? It's like people dying everywhere and all you need is love.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a really beautiful, interesting kind of art form that subverts tradition and, breaks the rules a little bit, which I think, falls in line really well with Scott Pilgrim, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of these AMV editors taught themselves how to edit videos by doing this hobby. And that's how I learned how to edit too. So we're all really passionate about it. We want to see it, grow and change and, the international community get closer and all those things. So the documentary is really like a love letter to AMVs and to editors and, and the community and everything. So
that's really cool. One of the ones or the clips I've seen from an AMV that makes me laugh every single time is the Dragon Ball Z Whitney Houston. I will always love you. I die laughing every time I see that one.
Yeah.
It cracks me up so much.
It's so good. So my husband and I both edit AMVs. Sorry, Scott. I have to tell people. He doesn't like it when I tell people.
Why?
But well, it's such a nerdy thing, right? A lot of AMV editors are really anonymous about it. They're really private. But
that's sad.
It is. I hope it'll change, but so we during the pandemic, everybody had their project, right? To like cope with that. So me and him watched Bo Burnham's Inside.
Oh, yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it so much. And so when we heard and saw the song A White Woman's Instagram, we're like, okay, we've got to do something with this, right? We've got to do something. And I said, it'd be great if we did that and did, a multi-source, like all these different anime and replicate every single shot, right? Of Bo Burnham's music video.
Yeah.
And I said, that'd be so great, but I would never do it because it'd be so much work to recreate like Instagram UIs and things like that. And my husband was like, well, I'll do that part. So we made it together. We made
awesome.
An AMV and it's called Weebstagram. And it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, this actually, I think ties in perfectly with your choice of film you wanted to discuss today. So outside of the similar connections between AMV and Scott Pilgrim versus the World, why do you love this movie?
So I think there's two reasons, right? There's the content and there's the packaging of the movie, right? So the content, I really love this film because it takes issue with when you're in a relationship, you really have to go through and be real with each other, right? You have to go through the baggage, the evil exes, right? You gotta deal with this stuff if you're really gonna be in an authentic relationship, in something deep and real. And so I love that. And I love the, dismantling of this idea of Ramona as this perfect person. And you realize that she's not, right? Scott's not, for sure. But that you can still have a relationship with imperfect people, right? I love that. I also love the packaging because I'm a huge Edgar Wright fan. I love his work. I love how he directs with the edit in mind. And so rather than, getting into the editing suite and saying, okay, what do we do with this footage? Every single shot, it's like he's seen it already, And so all the in-camera transitions and, beautiful just synergy of the audio mixing and design and the visual and the graphics and the acting and everything. It flows together so well. And I feel like he's such an unsung hero in film, to be honest. It was shocking to me. We just saw the Oscars not too long ago. And I was like, you know what? I don't think Edgar Wright's ever won an Oscar. And I looked it up. I was like, no, he's never been nominated for an Oscar. I was like, this is atrocious. So that's why I wanted to talk about it.
Mr. Pilgrim! It is I, Matthew Patel. Consider our fight begun.
What did I do? What do I do?
I feel like, yeah, I personally love his style as well. Like, I think it's incredibly unique and provides a lot of action where there isn't action. I think there was a every frame of painting video essay on how he edits non-action into action, and it's really great. I mean, a lot of great filmmakers have never been nominated or won an Oscar. Hitchcock never won an Oscar.
Really?
Yep.
I did not know.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I hope so. I just said it and I'm like,
we'll fix that in post.
I'll fix that in post. So tell me about, so this movie came out in 2010. So tell me about the first time you remember seeing this movie. Like, who were you? Where were you with? What was that experience like? Yeah.
So I actually don't remember the specific first time that I saw this movie, but I know the context because in 2010, I was in college. Which feels like forever ago. I was in college and I was not into anime. And I didn't play fighting video games, right? Like, so the two kind of things you need to love this film, at least, you know.
From an aesthetic standpoint.
Right, yeah, I didn't love. But I was surrounded by people who did. You know, all of my friends were anime nerds. And so it was kind of destiny that I would become one too. But, you know, I was rooming with my best friend and we regularly would have these movie nights, right? Especially because one of our roommates was from China. And so we were trying to introduce her to all these Western films. Poor thing, she sat through Lord of the Rings and hated every second of it.
What?
She hated it. It was so slow, you know, whatever. Oh. I love Lord of the Rings. But one of the movies that we watched was Scott Pilgrim. And I think that in future watches, especially, you know, when my husband and I started talking and becoming closer friends, you know, we watched it again. And it was like every single time that I'd watch it again, I'd love it more, you know, just because I was kind of being sucked into that community. And also because I was becoming more aware of film, right? And realizing what it took to make a film like this. You know, in 2010, I wasn't even in film yet. You know, I was still, you know, acting in theater. And it wasn't until 2011 that I really got introduced through screenwriting to, you know, the world of film and kind of the other side of the coin, right, from theater, and really fell in love with it then. So, yeah, it's a movie that I started out kind of interested, kind of curious about, and just every single watch has grown on me even more.
What about it has grown? And kind of like with that, what has made you, or what made you come around to like loving film as much as you do?
Yeah. I think it was two things. So when I first got started doing film, I was a PA, and you know this because you hired me.
What shoot was that? That was forever ago. I was trying to remember.
That was Brian. I think that was 2012 maybe?
That sounds about right, because I put out Brian in 2013. Nobody look that up because I don't like that. I don't like watching that movie anymore.
You're like, that doesn't exist. Just ignore it. No, but I was thinking about this recently. Man, you know, sometimes like the first loaf of bread I baked was not any good, but you had to do it, you know? I feel like as filmmakers, like you got to just start somewhere. And that was, I think, the beautiful thing about that era of my life was that it was like, you know, getting your feet wet and being on set late nights and early mornings and coffee, and you kind of grow to love it, even though it's kind of wild and unpredictable and you're, you know, beating your head against the wall trying to make something good. And so I love the production side from that end. So also bringing my husband into this. So when I got married to him and I moved to Virginia, I had absolutely nothing to do. I had beyond nothing to do because I didn't have a job. I didn't know a single person in the town we moved to. And so I was like, well, what else am I going to do? I'll learn to edit. So he taught me how to use Premiere, and it was terrible. We had so many fights because he's like, well, hit the cut button. And I was like, these are hieroglyphics. They mean nothing to me, you know? But I edited my first AMV, and, you know, that was when I started really understanding what it took to create a pace and a flow in an edit, and really like respect and understand the effort that goes in on the back end to all the post-production. And at that point, you know, I was kind of hooked. You know, I started making AMVs and going to contests. And the crazy thing is, so I had my first child in 2018, which was awesome. But long story short, I ended up having to quit my job the morning she was born.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. I went in and talked to my boss, and I was like, look, I know I swore up and down for 9 months. I wasn't going anywhere, but my childcare canceled. So sorry.
Oh, wow.
And that night she was born. And so the next month, not the next day, good Lord, the next month I started my business, Poppy Plum Media, because I couldn't go back to work. I had to be home with her. Yeah. And I knew we had to, you know, bring in an income. This was the only thing I knew how to do now. So from there, it just kind of took off, and now I'm inextricably linked to film forever.
That's awesome. So your business, Poppy Plum Media, as well as your work with documentaries and everything, you're very much content creator. You run your own business. Do you think that the style of this movie shaped movies and content and TV that came after it?
I do. I think it was ahead of its time.
So, what can I get you?
Is there anywhere you don't work?
They're called jobs, something a ball like you wouldn't know anything about. And by the way, I can't believe you asked Ramona out after I specifically told you not to do that.
How are you doing that with your mouth?
Never mind how I'm doing it. What do you have to say for yourself?
Can I get a caramel macchiato?
You know what? Maybe it's high time you took a look in the mirror before you wreak havoc on another girl.
It broke ground in this style of, you know, kind of rebellious filmmaking, right? Breaking the fourth wall, breaking the rules, breaking, you know, form, and still telling a story that was, you know, not shallow by any means. Like, this is a deep story, but it's told in a way that's so accessible, right? I think of even like current films that do this, right? Like, we just recognize Barbie as an Oscar nom, right? And American Fiction as an Oscar nom. And these are films that have really important messages, but they're also palatable to watch, right? They're not bashing you over the head with it. It's really accessible for the average person. And so, yeah, I think it impacted that. I think it also impacted pop culture, right? There was this huge, I mean, obviously box office flop because of course, but, you know, after it came out, you know, this rise in this kind of alt punk, you know, acceptance in pop culture and all of these things. And, you know, even in hipsterdom, which I was definitely accused of being hipster, I'm not gonna lie. But of course I wasn't, because
they just didn't get it. They just didn't understand.
They didn't get it. Yeah, it was just deep.
So sorry for the interruption, but I will be brief. I am so grateful that you decided to listen to the Film Nuts podcast today. If you are enjoying what you're hearing, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. With a small monthly amount, you can get access to behind-the-scenes goodies, early access to full episodes, and you can vote on what movie we watch the first Monday of every month on the Nut House Discord. The Nut House itself is free to join and is full of other film and TV lovers, so you'll fit right in. You can check out info on all these things in the show notes. And if all of this sounds like a bit too much, that's totally okay. But if you want to keep up to date on all of our episodes, please be sure and subscribe on your favorite platform of choice. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and leave a rating and review so we can get in front of other awesome people like yourself. Okay, enough of me rambling. Back to the good stuff. The thing that I was noticing this time around watching it is I hadn't seen it since around the time it came out. I remember appreciating it, but not like loving it. And I think I still feel that way, but I'm looking at it now and I'm like, visually and aesthetically, this was like we're seeing stuff in the past 3 years that visually looks like this movie.
Yeah. Like,
especially with visual effects. And even, and beyond like content you watch on your phone, like TikTok-y stuff and Instagram filters and stuff like that. But like, I immediately actually thought of Into the Spider-Verse with just the way that it incorporated graphic novel language, like having that on screen. One of my favorite bits in Into the Spider-Verse is like someone gets hit with a bagel and bagel shows up. Yeah. That's one. And so like watching this movie, I was reminded a lot of that aesthetic that I really loved. And this movie to me, like, I'd forgotten how visually striking everything is. Like in my head, I was like, duh. But like watching it, I was like, oh yeah, this had a lot to do. And there are a lot of really like funny, clever jokes in it too, as well. But one of the things, going back, we were talking about how the stuff you weren't into, like the pop culture, nerdy, video gamey type stuff, like this, obviously this has all of that.
Oh yeah.
But a lot of what is incorporated, especially with the visual effects stuff, is very like 8-bit oriented and very things that can trigger nostalgia in a lot of people. What kind of power do you think nostalgia has over an audience, both with this movie and maybe just in general?
Yeah, I think that, obviously we see a lot of companies trying to capitalize on nostalgia right now. And you can tell when it's fake and you can tell when it's real. And I think when it's real and at its best, it's not necessarily a longing for that thing that you're nostalgic for. I think it's a nostalgia for the person you were when you engaged with that thing first, right? So, I mentioned we have kids. And so we're introducing them to not just current like Mario and gaming and stuff, but also like they played Mario 64.
Heck yeah.
And it's like, right, they're cool. They're cool.
Great parents you are.
Thank you. I know. So I think it's really nostalgic for us to give our kids this thing that we played when we were kids, or at least I played when I was a kid. But it's this kind of connection between, this, I guess, reconnecting with your childhood and then also passing it on, right, to the next generation. And I think for me, when I see films like Scott Pilgrim, it reminds me of one of the best versions of myself, right? Who I was in 2010, like in college, before all the complications, come up of life, of the heaviness of a mortgage and things like that.
When you say like the better version, is it like, do you mean like just more innocent with less responsibilities? Like the more fun, like the more carefree?
A little bit. I think there was just so much more freedom to like be creative. Like there's a word that I always associate with that era of my life, and it's moxie.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That it was like, no one told me I couldn't, so I was just going to do it. I was just, going to walk barefoot all over campus because I thought maybe it was bringing awareness to kids without shoes, right? Like, right? You remember that?
Oh, I remember judging those people.
Yeah, that was me. I'll admit it. But it like
I wasn't
so
judgment. I was worried.
Yeah,
I was worried.
Yeah, it hurt. No, but that like courage of conviction, right? Of like just without restriction being yourself. And I think now, that's lost a little bit, at least for me personally, because, I'm a mom, I'm the business owner, and I'm old, or at least I feel older. And it feels like there's so much consequence for being yourself, right? In a certain way. I think in some ways we've tried to open that up as a society, but also I think it's been hampered a lot by how much social media has grown between like 2010 and now, right?
Right.
And the ways that it's pivoted into like monetizing yourself, right?
Yeah.
So living in that age where, I didn't have to monetize myself. I didn't have to worry about my brand image, right?
You weren't worried about an algorithm.
Yeah, no, I was not worried about an algorithm at all. I didn't even know that an algorithm existed. I was just having fun and being silly. And yeah, and so I think, we go back to these pieces of content, that we go back to these touchstones to try to regain that piece of ourself, right? And you always look back with rose-colored glasses, right? Like, make no mistake. But I think that, to me, that's what nostalgia really does, and why I love it. So.
What do you think we can do to hold on to who we used to be? Like, it's nice to have reminders, of the people we used to be, the times in which we used to exist, but like, surely there's got to be a way to retain some of that, who we are. I recently did this video essay on memory and how even if we forget like the events of things, like we're still shaped by like what actually happened to us and what we participated in. Yeah. So, I mean, I did not send you this question ahead of time because I just thought of it. That's okay. Yeah. Is there a way you think that we can both remember who we were and hold on to those things we found important back then and keep them going now especially like raising a younger generation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's a balance, right? Like you want to look back fondly and take with you the pieces of yourself that you want to keep, right? That you want to preserve, but also recognize that it wasn't perfect, right? I mean, Scott Pilgrim is a great example of this, right? Of Ramona looking back at all her, chapters of her love life, right? And saying like, wow, I was kind of a bitch.
You going?
I should probably disappear.
After all that?
I still need a new life. I came here to escape, but the past keeps catching up. I'm tired of people getting hurt because of me.
I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get over it.
I don't mean just you.
No, I understand.
I should thank you, though,
For what?
for being the nicest guy I ever dated.
The fact that she's coming to terms with that fact that the past use or whatever, like there was good and bad, right? Yeah. And I think the way to take the good with you is to one, see it for what it was, right? But then also to recognize that you are still that person, right? Mm-hmm. That as much as, there's been times in my life where I didn't feel like I had any moxie, right? But recognizing that I can look back at, especially content I created, journaling that I did, right? Those tangible pieces, even pictures, and say like, that person is still in here, like you can be that again. You can be the parts of that you want to be again, and I think especially, I don't know, to me, post-pandemic, I think that's especially important because we lost so much during the pandemic that now trying to regain even 4 years past the beginning of it, right? Which is still wild to me to think about.
That was 4 years? What?
I know, right? It started 4 years ago. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, right? And I'm like, man, that's crazy.
It feels like last year and 10 years ago.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So I think that, that's a really important exercise for us to do now to like go back and say like, yeah, we can do these things. We can be these people again, right? I have a friend who went to a concert alone this past weekend. She was so proud of herself. And I was like, I'm so proud of you.
Heck yeah.
Like, I wouldn't do that.
I go to the movies alone all the time. This makes me
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And it's regaining that, like, I can, so I will.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you brought that up about Ramona because, like, Scott is basically, he's not a good person.
No, he's a trash person.
I was like watching this. I was like, I don't remember him being such a dick.
Yeah. And the dating a high schooler thing didn't age well either. Like, let's be real.
Yeah, that should never age well anyway. But yeah, but watching it again, I was like, no, but it makes sense that he is a jerk in this movie because of the journey that he goes on. Like that makes sense. And I think, touching on that, I think, that reminded me, I was like, basically, I get so distracted with this movie. Because
like,
there's so
much, beautiful.
There's so much going on visually.
Yeah.
And even from a sound design perspective, like,
oh my gosh,
it's bananas that sometimes I like forget to look and see what the movie's actually doing. So showing this like attraction to Ramona is like basically Scott, like coming to realize that he's the problem.
I'm the problem. It's me. Yeah. Exactly. And then like dealing with that. And I think, there's always been some controversy over the ending and did they handle it well and stuff. And, that's obviously there. But I think also I really love it from our perspective now of having seen the anime that's on Netflix, right? Which I don't want to.
That's right.
It's so
That's
good.
right. Okay.
It's so good.
I forgot that came out. Okay. I'll need to check that out.
You've got to watch it. Yeah. It's so good. And I think it's so good too because it revisits the story with fresh eyes.
Okay.
That say like, okay, well maybe we shouldn't kill our exes. Maybe we should like make peace with that. Right.
Doesn't sound as fun.
I promise you it's still fun.
Okay.
It's still super fun. I loved what they did with it.
Very cool.
And especially getting the whole cast back together. Like who can do that nowadays,
Yeah.
Like the whole cast.
I think you say that, but I feel like there are things coming out within the past like 2 or 3 years, like these like reboots and like let's get the gang back together, let's get the band back together kind of thing, which I'm all for in certain contexts. So like, but the fact that they did it and they changed it's all animated, right?
It's all anime, yeah.
See, I like that when they change the format of things, keep it fresh.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
Even like, so, the Canadian author of the graphic novels, right, was inspired by anime to make the graphic novels. And there's obviously a lot taken from, traditional anime style in that sense. Then, the film was made, and now with the anime being made, they actually got an anime studio to produce it. So it's technically, I will fight you on this. It is technically anime, which is amazing and incredible. And the only thing non-anime about it is the fact that the idea was originally written by a Canadian, right? That's literally it.
Yeah. I just love when there are these so many intersections.
It's so cool.
On media. Like you can have a Canadian graphic artist who is inspired by a Japanese anime, then that gets turned into a North American feature film with a British director. Like it's like all of that. Yeah. I think I love when stuff like that happens.
I love it. I love that cross-cultural connections, because it makes something so completely unique that nobody could have made like on their own.
Yeah. So what's your favorite moment or scene from the movie?
This was such a hard question. I was thinking about this rewatching it because it's hard to pull any of the scenes out of context because they're so connected. It all just flows so much. I think if I had to pick one, I really like the sequence where he's meeting Ramona for the first time.
Hey, what's up?
Nothing.
Hey, you know Pac-Man?
I know of him.
Well, Pac-Man was originally called Puck-Man. They changed it because not because Pac-Man looks like a hockey puck. Paku means flap your mouth. And they were worried people would scratch out the P, turn it into an F, like.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Am I dreaming? I'll leave you alone forever now. Thanks.
We go into the party scene and you've got all those insane cuts. You can't even, you'd have to pause it to, count them all and the way that they're cutting. And even, I was watching with family and friends last night, and some of them hadn't seen it before. And my brother was like, man, this is so refreshing, the pacing of this party scene.
It's fast.
It's so fast. It's so fast. Because it's like, okay, let me tell you what you need to know.
Right.
What do you know what a party is.
Yeah. High school party. We've seen all of these. We know exactly what happens.
Yeah. You don't need to see all the party. You just need to see Scott making fool of himself. That's all you need to know. And the intersection, I feel like it's such a good encapsulation of the whole film, the way that the graphics are used and where he's sliding in and covering up the words to be next to Ramona, the payoff of the Pac-Man joke, right? It's it's just such a great microcosm for the film itself. And also, as much as Scott is a terrible person, he's also really adorkable, So I love that. We were actually, this was funny. We were watching it last night, and again, there were people who had never seen this film before. And they stopped midway through the beginning, right? We hadn't even gotten to Matthew Patel yet, right?
Okay.
Just very early. And they go, I know why you like this film. And I was like, what are you talking about? You know why I like this film? And they're like, there are some similarities with your husband, Scott. And I was like, I know there are. I know there are.
Hopefully not the problematic reasons.
No, that adorkable energy, big nerd, really shy, oh yeah, that's him. Yeah. So yeah, but I really love that scene and the interaction of the characters, and especially Aubrey Plaza. I love introducing people to this film because they are so taken aback by all the star talent.
This is stacked. It's a stacked cast.
Brie Larson's in this?
Yeah.
Chris Evans is in this? I'm like, yes, they were in this. And it was before, a lot of them were really big too. So it's crazy.
So you recently watched it for the first time with your family?
It was their first time. Yeah.
Did you say anything to get them to watch it? Or you're like, hey, I'm going to watch this movie for a podcast. Do you want to watch it with me? Yeah.
I mean, I basically rolled up yesterday and was like, all right, I'm watching this tonight. You guys are watching with me.
Okay. What did they think of it?
I think it was a positive reaction. My mom is not the target demographic.
Okay.
So her reaction was a little different that, I think they laughed at a lot of the jokes. So that was good. But I think there was also very much I recognize who this is for and it's not me. So I think it is one of those films that it's a cult classic for a reason, right? That it resonates with some people and it just doesn't resonate with others. And that's okay. There are other Edgar Wright films for them. So they can watch Shaun of the Dead or something.
A question I was going to ask you was if you had a double feature with this and another Edgar Wright movie, what would you pair it with?
Oh, man, do I want to be funny or do I want to give a good pairing? Because I also really love Last Night in Soho. But that is,
I do too, but a lot of people don't like it.
Oh no. That's a hard watch, man. Some of those scenes are brutal. But still just gorgeous editing. Just amazing. I would probably pair it with, I don't know, because if you want to do a sweet and salty kind of thing, you can do Scott Pilgrim and Last Night in Soho. But if you wanted to do something more accessible, I'd probably do Shaun of the Dead. I feel like that's generally pleasing to most people, you know?
Yeah.
And gets at that humor, right? Yeah.
So if you had to, people who watch and listen to this podcast, this thing is full of spoilers. So like, hopefully people who are watching this, listen to it, know exactly what happens. But if you were recommending this movie to someone, what would you say to get them to watch it?
Okay. I would tell them that they need to watch Scott Pilgrim versus the World because it covers a lot of themes that you get in like a rom-com, right? It covers those really like digestible themes of dealing with relationships, but in the most fun way possible. And I would say the one word of caution is that you need to sit down and buckle up and just embrace and let it happen because it's a ride, right? And you need to just let it happen. Don't question it. Just go with it. One of my friends who watched it with us this week was like, I was trying to decide if, you know, the game mechanics were actually happening or if it was just in Scott's mind and everyone else was just seeing him like fight these people. Right. And I was kind of like, no and yes, you know, like it doesn't matter if it's real or not. And I think that's the perspective you have to have coming into the film is that it doesn't matter, like the magical realism, like it doesn't matter if it's real or not. Just let it happen, you know.
I'm stealing this question from a podcast that I was on. They asked me it, and it's really great. If you hadn't seen this movie, what person do you think you would be? Like, who do you think you would be if you had not seen this movie?
Boring. Probably.
I don't know. That was my answer on the on the podcast.
It's so boring. I feel like the strength of this film is that it gives you permission, right? It gives you so much permission that you see like these flawed, crazy people, like, you know, stereotypes and caricatures of people. And you say like, well, you know, if those characters can figure it out and like have life and have relationships and it's messy, but they work through it, then like, it's okay to be messy. You know, it's okay to admit that you were wrong. It's okay. Like, I think one of the most powerful things for me is near the end where Scott has to actually like confront his wrongdoings and like admit what he's done. That there's this freedom of like, oh, well, now that we've spoken it, right? Now that we have said, I did this and it was wrong and I hurt you and I'm sorry.
Nigga Scott.
No. This is something I have to face. Myself.
Solo round.
This incredible French toast with like bananas on it. And you get bacon on the side. I'm liking that, yeah. Oh, let's do it next week. Yeah, cool. Yeah, all right. Be good. Yeah. Hey.
What happened?
Oh, nothing. We just shot the shit. He's just a really nice guy. We're gonna get brunch next week. We actually have a lot in common.
The weight just completely lifts, right?
Yeah.
That there's just this open path forward. And I think, you know, there's so much freedom when you're able to not take yourself too seriously and admit that you're messy. And so I think if I hadn't seen this film, I probably would be really boring and still trying to like, I don't know, be a normie. Yeah, probably. I dyed my hair. Did I tell you that?
After the movie?
No. Like
What?
during the pandemic.
Okay.
Like I dyed it. So it was like purple for a while and then it was like hot pink for a while.
Oh, really?
yeah. And it's like those things that it's like, I was always so scared to do things.
Was it
like
every
that.
week and a half or?
No, it wasn't every week and a half. That's expensive. Man.
I was like, that's a lot.
But she does it at home. That might make it easier.
Yeah.
But no. But I think like those little tangible things that, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't like, it doesn't mean anything, right? It's just your hair color, right? It's not a big deal, but it gives you that permission to kind of step outside the box.
Well, Megan, this is great. Thanks so much for coming on. I had a lot of fun revisiting this movie.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Go watch Scott Pilgrim.
Do it. I think it's a really fun idea to think about what got us into our chosen career paths or interests. I mean, it doesn't have to be a movie, but it says something about the power of art if our exposure to it can lead us down any number of paths in life, especially if it takes us into uncharted but rewarding territory. A huge thanks to Megan for chatting with me today, and a vegan superpowered size thank you to you for joining us. Please check out the links below to see some of the AMVs we referenced in our conversation, as well as more information on Megan's documentary, Synced Together, AMVs and Their Editors. If you enjoyed the show today, please go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our episodes on your favorite podcast platform of choice. And if you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, please, pretty please, leave a rating and review. That helps us get noticed by more awesome people like yourself. If you really enjoyed the show today and you are enjoying all of the episodes the Film Nuts podcast has to offer, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. You can get access to some really cool perks and help the show grow to be bigger and better than it is now. You can check out the link to that below or visit patreon.com/filmnuts. Our theme this season is brought to us by The Deep End. Our artwork is designed by Madungwa Sibohudi. Our head of production is Keaton Lusk, and all episodes of the Film Nuts podcast are produced and edited by me, Taylor D. Adams. If you want to get in touch, you can email filmnutspodcast@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter @filmnutspodcast. And don't forget to join the Nut House Discord community absolutely free by checking out the link in the show notes. Thank y'all again so much for joining us today. But for now, I got to take off.
Is Scott here?
You know what? He just left.